All right, so we're back for another video. Now we're going to talk about fact finding. How do you do a true needs analysis to find what is the right level of coverage for your customer? Your customer is going to be looking at this as a sales transaction. It is very important for you to be able to, as quickly as possible, get them to understand that you're on their side. You're not trying to sell them anything. You're not trying to convince them to buy something. You want them to have the right level of coverage that is appropriate for their family. The sooner you can get them to understand that, the more honest they will be, the more walls will come down because they are going to have built up walls to try to not sell themselves. With referrals, with people you know, those walls will already be broken down. With leads or people you've never met before, there's inherently going to be a thought that the customer, that you are trying to sell them something so that you can make a buck off of them. Now, of course, you are paid for the work that you do. You are paid for what you sell, and there are some products that pay you more than others. But we should never be selling products based on what is right for us. We want to sell products based on what is right for our customers. So first and foremost, you have to be of the mindset that health insurance or insurance in general is there to protect against the big stuff. I don't have insurance on my cell phone, on my TV, on any of my appliances, because those are all small items that I can afford to replace. I only have insurance on the big ticket items: my house, my car, my life, my health, etc. And so the sooner you understand that, the sooner that you believe that, the better consultative approach you can have, the more objective you can be in helping your customers stay focused on the appropriate level of coverage. Now, with that as a backdrop, that means that things like doctor office visits and scripts aren't terribly important. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have a cheap copay when I go to the doctor, but it's never going to break the bank if I have to pay $50, $100, or even if I had to pay for the whole visit. But I can't afford to pay for my cancer treatment. I can't afford to pay for my heart surgery. I can't afford to have months and months off of work. And so these are the things that you need to get your mind around, that you need to get your customers' mind around, to helping them understand what truly is valuable. At the end of the day, someone's ability to earn an income is their biggest asset. You may have a $500,000 house. You could even drive a $200,000-$300,000 car. But over your lifetime, you will earn way more than any of those numbers. And so your ability to earn an income is your biggest asset. So let me put it a different way. If you had a machine that printed money in your basement, would you insure it? Of course you would. Well, guess what? Your job is your ability to print money. And I'm not talking about you as the agent, I'm talking about the customer. And so when we talk about protecting the assets, yes, we want to protect the expense of having heart surgery. We want to protect the expense of having cancer surgery. But we also need to protect against the lost wage. We need to protect against the mortgage payment that they're still going to have to make. We need to protect against the fact that they might need to modify their house, because if they get out of the hospital in a wheelchair, they may need to widen doorways, lower countertops, make home improvements to be able to make their house functional. My point is simply that when it comes to insurance, the direct medical expenses aren't the only expenses. And quite honestly, those indirect expenses, loss of wages, needing to change their home around, still having to pay the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, can sometimes far outweigh the medical expense itself. But what we get the ability to do is we get to cover our customer for all of it. And so the way that your customer is going to realize they need it is through the questions that you ask. So one of the first questions that you should be asking when you're fact finding: why are you buying health insurance? What are you looking to have it cover? And hopefully your customer understands the concept. And they say, I'm worried about if I ever have a heart attack. I'm worried about if I ever have an injury. I'm worried about the big stuff. That's what you want to hear. But when your customers start saying, well, I want to have coverage for doctor office visits and scripts, they're not thinking of the big picture. And so you then have to get them to understand the big picture. Now, you're going to do all of that through asking questions. Because if I sit here and say it, you may or may not believe it. But if I can get you to say it, I know you believe it. And so it's way, way more important to get my customer to get my customer to answer and say what I want them to say. So if my customer says, I'm only worried about doctor's office visits and scripts, I'm probably going to ask a question like, well, what about hospitalization? What about a surgery? What if something major happened? And you may get customers who say, that's happened to me, I'm not worried about that. And then you need to dig a little bit deeper. Well, what would happen if you got hit by a car? What would happen if you had a sports injury? What would happen if someone in your family had something happen? Talk to them and use examples. Who in your family has had situations? But you've got to get them to realize that the big picture is way, way more expensive than the little stuff. Sure, they may only have 1 or 2 hospitalizations in their lifetime, but when they do, the expenses are going to be exorbitant. And the minute we get them to understand that insurance is to cover the big stuff, then we protect the right way for the big stuff. Yep, we're going to get you major medical coverage, which will take care of the doctor and the hospital and all of the direct medical expenses. But when you sit here and talk about the big things, what happens after the fact? Are you going to go back to work the day you get out of the hospital? Or will you miss weeks or months or maybe even a year? Who's going to pay the house? Who's going to pay the car? Who's going to run your business? Who's going to pay for the health insurance when you need it the most? All very valid questions that will get your customer thinking and realizing just having health insurance isn't enough. So how do you effectively fact find and get them to understand the need? So the first thing you're doing is you've got to look at yourself as a painter. You're going to paint a picture in their mind. You're going to get them to realize and visualize exactly what you're talking about. But the examples that you give have to be very, very specific. So when I'm talking to a customer who's young and healthy, I'm probably not talking a lot about heart attacks and cancers. Probably talking more about injuries. So when you fact find, part of your fact finder is asking them, what do you do? Tell me a little bit about yourself. What kind of hobbies do you have? Because the more you understand the customer in a personal light, the more you can get them to understand and realize what you're trying to connect with them. So let me give you an example. Both of my children played hockey. As a matter of fact, they both still play hockey. I can remember training agents in the past who wouldn't dig deep enough. And they would start talking about my kids. They talk about my kids in sports, which it's a great thing, right? You want to definitely tie it to the kids because they're definitely someone who could use the insurance and the emotional need to want to protect my kids. Very, very smart idea. But you got to connect it all the way through. Because some agents in the past have talked to me about my kids getting hurt playing soccer, playing basketball. Well, my kids don't play soccer or basketball. So that picture you're painting doesn't seem realistic because those aren't examples that my family partakes in. So asking that one extra question, not just are your kids active, but what sports do they play? Have they ever been hurt playing those sports? What kind of injury was it? Sometimes the examples you give your customers are examples they already told you about. Oh yeah, my kid broke his collarbone last year playing hockey, got checked into the boards. So now when it comes time to start talking about the accident plans, you can say, remember when you told me about Billy's accident? Well, the next time he gets checked into the boards, you're going to get a $10,000 payout if he's admitted into the hospital. or whatever plan you're selling. That seems very realistic because it's happened to the customer. It seems very realistic because it is realistic. It really did happen. So get very specific with your customers. The only way that you can do that is to ask questions about them. So find out what kind of hobbies they have. Find out what kind of sports they play. Find out what kind of work they do. And really get a good understanding as to who they are and how they use their plan. So yes, of course, you're going to ask questions like, how often do you go to the doctor? And do you take any medications? And when's the last time you're in the emergency room? But those are surface level questions. Dig deeper. Better understand where their pain is. Better understand why they need insurance, why they are freaked out about it. And what you might find is that there's a need that they didn't even know. But when you can truly understand someone's concern and worry, now you can take care of that. You can solve that problem. You can eliminate that need through a plan. And so sometimes you'll sell accident plans to the young and healthy. Sometimes you'll sell illness plans to the older or unhealthy. Sometimes you'll sell life insurance to someone who just lost an aunt. Sometimes you'll sell all of it, but you'll only be able to do it through getting really deep into questions. So when you are going through and you're asking those questions, take notes, get a good, thorough understanding of their situation, and then ultimately tie those questions back in to the products that you recommend. There are some products that will sell themselves. Never have I tried to sell dental. Dental sells itself. If a customer goes for 2 dental cleanings a year, they're getting dental. Because by the time they pay for 2 cleanings out of pocket, they will have already paid for the cost of the plan. Almost every single customer, 99% plus of my customers, are getting an accident rider. Why? Because it's $28 a month. And it pays a $15,000 benefit. Do the math on that. That means that your customer will it will take your customer 45 years to pay out $15,000. Let's reverse that. That means that if your customer has 1 accident in the next 45 years, they will get more out of the plan than they have put in. I don't care if your customer is Warren Buffett and they're worth billions of dollars. If your customer has 1 accident in the next 45 years, they will get more out of the plan than they have put into the plan. The accident rider is the biggest no-brainer on the face of the earth. Not only will it pay out or be beneficial financially if they use it once every 45 years, but they can technically use it every single year. In theory, if my customer had a hospitalization every year for an accident, they would get a $15,000 payout every single year. So the story or the analogy, the saying that I always like to give my customers is, if you could buy $1 for 50 cents, how many dollars would you buy? The answer should be as many as I could. So it doesn't matter if my customer needs the 15 grand. It doesn't matter if my customer needs to cover their deductible. But if it mathematically makes sense, if they can get a $15,000 payout and they never have to pay $15,000 in, they're ahead of the game. So those plans almost always go on every single policy. And your customers will never cancel them, because once they understand that the math works, they'll keep it forever. So see, I don't sell. I use logic. I explain, and I get my customers to understand the mathematical sense behind the plans that we use. And only when the math makes sense do I recommend it. There are plenty of plans out there where the benefit is way too expensive for the cost of the plan. So I'm not going to recommend it. But going back to fact finding, You should spend at least your first 5, probably 10, and sometimes as much as 15 minutes asking questions about your customer. How do you use your plan? When's the last time you used your plan? What do you like about your current plan? What do you dislike about your current plan? Why are you looking to switch off of your current plan? Of the doctors you gave me, which of them are must-haves, which of them are like to haves, and which of them are really don't need to haves? Because if they're doctors that are must-haves are on multiple plans, but the doctors that are like to haves are only on the expensive plan, hey, we can save our customer a lot of money by going with something else. You might have to give up one doctor, but if you only see this doctor once a year, does it really matter? So you really want to get inside your customer's head. And the more you get them talking, the more comfortable they will be. If you're doing all the talking and your customer is sitting there listening, you have no idea what they're thinking. But when your customer is talking, you will be able to hear their tone of voice. You'll be able to see their facial expressions. You will know what they're thinking. And they don't even have to say it. So you have to ask them a lot of questions. You have to get them talking. And what you're going to find is your customers will give you all the information that you could ever need. They will sell themselves. They will tell you that they don't have life insurance. They will tell you that they know they should have life insurance. They will tell you that they only have 2 weeks worth of income in the bank. And if they were out of work for a month, they would be blank out of luck. But those are the questions you have to ask. How much do you make on a yearly basis? How long could you survive if you were hurt and unable to work? What would you do if you had cancer and you couldn't work for the next 6 months? If you had to go to the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic or MD Anderson, is it important to have those doctors and hospitals in your network? Don't talk about doctor office visits. Don't talk about scripts. That's never going to be the place that financial ruin happens. And insurance is supposed to protect against financial ruin. 80% of bankruptcies are caused by a medical claim. That probably doesn't surprise you. But what does surprise you is that over 80% of those people had health insurance. So they're not filing bankruptcy because of the copay. They're not filing bankruptcy because of the deductible. They're filing bankruptcy because they didn't have other plans in place. They didn't have disability. They didn't have supplements. They didn't have something that would put food on the table when they were hurt and unable to work. Now think of your target customer. It's a landscaper. It's a painter. It's a plumber. It's someone who is oftentimes self-employed but has no employees. Well, let me ask you, if you're a landscaper and for the next 6 months you couldn't mow lawns, do you really expect and think that your customers would be loyal to you 6 months down the road when you weren't mowing their lawn? So what's going to happen to your business? It's going to go away. They're all going to find a new lawn service. Let's be honest, they're not going to come back to you once you're back on your feet. You're going to say, I got a new company. It's all taken care of. I'm not switching back. So that person has a medical event. They missed 6 months worth of work, but oh, by the way, their business is now gone because they weren't able to run it. My point is simply, if we could put some money in that business owner's hand, so he was able to hire an employee to be able to mow those lawns for the next 6 months. Now, when he gets back to work, he has a business there. Same thing with the painter. If he doesn't paint a single house for the next 6 months, is he really going to have return clients after the fact? If your mechanic doesn't fix a single car for the next 6 months, is his business still going to be functional? How's he going to pay the mortgage? How's he going to pay the rent, the lease, the overhead, etc.? These are the things that you as the agent need to think about. These are the things that you need to ask your customer, what would you do if? Because if we're only protecting them for the doctor expense, for the prescription expense, for the surgeon's fee, we're not really protecting the customer. If you really truly think about it, health insurance pays the doctor. Health insurance doesn't pay the individual that buys it. So all the health insurance does is make sure that the doctor can keep driving that Ferrari or Lamborghini because the doctor got paid. But the person who's out of work for 6 months is now still in very much a financial sticky situation. So that's where supplements and life insurance and the add-on products play such a huge role. And so it is so very important for you to understand that concept. And when you do, you'll find that it doesn't matter if my customer works in corporate America, because even the customers in corporate America still need the accident plans, the illness plans, the life insurance plans. So how can you help those customers? Fact finding. Every customer, you should be asking, what would you do if? And the if scenario that you give is directly tied to what they told you about. So again, I'm a hockey player. If someone came to me and said, what would you do if you blew out your knee and therefore you couldn't work for the next 3 months? What would you do if you got a concussion and you couldn't drive for the next 2 months? What would you do if, and you continue with the examples that are relevant to that person's lifestyle? Because now you're not selling. Now you're not talking about hypotheticals. Now you're talking about things that these people actually worry about. I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen someone hurt on the ice. And so have I thought about it? Yep. Have I worried about it? Yep. And so if you can tie those questions back to those oh shit moments for people, they will quickly and very consistently understand that they need those extra products. Oh, by the way, those extra products, that's really where you make the money. Health insurance is important for your income. Health insurance is important to open the door. But the supplements, the life insurance, the disabilities, that's where you make your money. And so don't sell the supplements because it's what's right for you. Sell the supplements because it's what's right for your customer. But you have to believe in it. You have to recommend it. And you have to have a justifiable reason as to why your customers should have it. And so when it makes sense financially, because $28 a month for a $15,000 benefit is a no-brainer. When it makes sense that the customer might use it, because let's be honest, accidents can happen to anyone, active or not. When it makes sense because you know that it's the right thing for the customer based on them being a business owner and having large deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses. And oh, by the way, it makes sense for you financially. That's a win across the board. But if you're selling it because of what it does for you, your customers will pick up on it. Your customers will see right through it. And ultimately, they're never going to trust you. They're never going to refer you. And they're always going to wonder in the back of their mind if they should go to someone else. So you have to truly believe in it. You have to have your heart in this game. Okay? And hopefully you can tell from this video that I do. I firmly believe that everyone should have dental if they go twice a year to the dentist. I firmly believe that everyone should have the accident plan. I firmly believe that everyone should have a critical illness plan, especially when 50% of people will wind up having either a heart attack or cancer. So this is what I believe in. So now I'm just telling my customers what I believe. I'm asking them questions as to how they use it, what keeps them up at night, what worries them, and then we solve those problems. So that's fact finding. Yeah, it's a booklet. Yeah, you can ask the facts. It's the emotion. It's making them know that you care, making them know that you want to protect them, and building that trust. When you do that, you will be tremendously successful.